actions. But Professor Pyro didn't believe that had anything to do with my outfit and claimed it had more to do with stage fright. I might have even believed her if it weren't for the fact that I was steadily improving in all of my other lessons. To prove my point, I'd asked Darcy, Sophia, and Diego to join me in the fire arena after dinner so that I could show them the improvements I'd made and get them to confirm that I wasn't insane. Darcy had been having similar troubles with her fire magic, and I wanted her to try wielding her flames without the suit too. Maybe I was onto something. To make sure that I had time to do that, I'd headed out on my evening run early, and I ran through water territory, with my headphones on and my heart rate up. I loved running here. Back in Chicago, it had been all back alleys and concrete jungle. I'd been dodging cars, pedestrians, and trash cans at every turn. In the academy grounds, I was more likely to come across a herd of Pegasus, a swooping griffin, or a shimmering waterfall. It was beyond beautiful here, and the differences between the four territories always took my breath away. I headed over a small bridge and began to circle the lake, adjusting my breathing as the hill elevated beneath my feet. A prickle ran along my spine as I reached the top of the hill, and I stumbled to a halt as a Nemean lion leapt out of the trees in front of me. My breath caught in my lungs as the huge lion roared excitedly and shook its mane before bounding into the trees on the other side of the path. The student was obviously enjoying stretching their powerful legs in their order form, and I stared after them in surprise. Shit, I don't think I'll ever get used to that. You should pay more attention to your surroundings, Darius called, and I turned to find him leaning against a tree like he had nowhere else in the world to be. He was wearing a mud-stained sports uniform with the Ignis symbol emblazoned on his chest. So I guessed he'd been at pitball training, but that didn't explain his sudden appearance here. This wasn't the first time I'd seen him while I was out running, and I was starting to get the feeling that he was following me. His reasons for doing so couldn't be anything good, so I changed up my routine every night this week, but I still kept bumping into him regardless. I glanced about in case the other heirs were going to spring a trap at any moment, but there was no sign of them. I pointed to my ears, shrugging like the heavy bass of the music in my headphones prevented me from hearing him, then ran on. He didn't make any move to follow me, but I upped my pace regardless. Turning from the main path and heading back towards the orb. The last thing I needed was to go to head with an heir right now. I was all for bringing them down covertly, but I wasn't ready to confront them directly. Not yet. I made it back to the orb and slowed as I used my water magic to clean the sweat and spattered mud from my skin and clothes. Professor Washer had taught us how to do it last week, and even though his description of reaching every little nook and cranny had made me vomit in my mouth, I had to admit that it was a damn handy bit of magic. One of my favorite tracks came on over the headphones, and I smiled to myself as I walked into the orb, giving my attention to the song as All the Small Things by Blink-182 blasted in my ears. I stepped through the door without really looking where I was going and crashed straight into a hard body. Sorry, I muttered, stepping back and glancing up to find Professor Orion looking down at me with a super unamused expression on his face. He was wearing a sports uniform splattered with mud too, and I vaguely remembered that he was the pitball coach. And there was me thinking that Blue was the clumsy twin, he said dryly. Just thought I'd mix it up a bit, I replied with a shrug, lifting one of my headphones off of my ear so that I could hear him properly. Well, I think I'd prefer it when you're predictably different to each other, he said, making a move to walk away from me. His sleeves were pushed back, and my gaze fell on the red symbol for Leo that was raised on his forearm. It didn't really look like a tattoo. It was more like a brand. Isn't Darius a Leo? I asked quickly, snagging his attention before he could walk away. My mouth always did run away from me. Apparently, even Mr. Grumpy's best death stare wasn't enough to make me back down. But if their connection could help us figure out what Astrom's message had meant, then it was worth annoying him over. Why would I have any interest in discussing Mr. A. Crux's star sign with you in my free time? He asked dismissively. Because you're a Libra, I said, and you've got a matching best friends forever tattoos. I just thought it was a bit strange. Orion's bored expression dipped into a scowl, which warned me in no uncertain terms to back off, but I raised my chin as I waited for his response. I may have just stepped into the arena with a pit bull, but I couldn't back down now. Perhaps if you spend as much time studying as you do inspecting other people's bodies, then you might not have so much trouble keeping up in my class, he suggested. Before I could reply, he turned and walked away. I watched him leave through narrowed eyes. Something weird was going on between him and Darius, and I had the feeling it involved me and my sister. Your Majesty, we've brought a selection of meals for the table for you to choose from, Angelica called. I turned as another enthusiastic ass member waved me over to our table in the center of the room, and moved to greet all of them while firmly reminding them to drop the royal titles. Again. I smiled as I spotted Sophia, Diego, and Darcy chatting together on their way towards the food, too. And I slipped between the crowd to join them before we dropped into our chairs in the middle of the ass club. Did you have a good run? Darcy asked. Yeah, you should all join me next time, I said. Ew, Sophia commented. I prefer to exercise in my order form or not at all. Yeah, I'm not really built for running or any kind of physical activities, Diego added, tugging his beanie hat a little lower like he was imagining it blowing away. I rolled my eyes at them. Your loss. Geraldine appeared and took the seat beside me. I smiled warmly at her as she offered me a slice of pizza from her plate. She was wearing a pitbull uniform too, with the symbol of Earth emblazoned on her chest, but she'd taken the time to remove the dirt from hers. I relaxed back into my chair as I took a bite of cheesy goodness. I overheard you talking to Orion about his tattoo, she said as she began to eat too. And I followed him like a dandy in a dagger hole, but to take a closer peek, out of interest. Look at you, Geraldine. I'm beginning to think I'm totally corrupting you, I teased. She blushed and went on. Did I hear you say that Darius A. Crux has one that matches? He does, I agreed. And I've seen the two of them hanging out. I shrugged. It hardly sounded like conspiracy, or the conspiracy theory of the year, but I knew in my gut that they were up to something. Darcy overheard our conversation and leaned in to join our discussion too. Do you know something? She asked, obviously noticing the fact that Geraldine looked about fit to burst. By golly, I think I do. From the looks of that tattoo and what you've told me, gooey oatcakes, I can't believe I'm even thinking this, but, I urged. Well, it looks like they've undergone the guardian bond, she said dramatically, looking around at us with wide eyes, like she'd just informed me she was pregnant with 14 kittens. Sorry, Geraldine, but we need a bit more explanation there, I said, and Darcy laughed. Oh, of course. So a guardian bond is an ancient piece of magic which links two souls together. In generations past, members of my family were selected to be guardians for members of yours, she added proudly. Oh, wow, Darcy said, as that was clearly the response Geraldine wanted. I shifted in my seat. My soul was perfectly content not being bound to anyone else's, thank you very much. Geraldine leaned forward conspiratorially to continue her explanation, and I was glad she wasn't making a suggestion to bond herself to us. In effect, magic is used to fuse the two of them together by linking their souls. Its purpose is to protect the life of an important person, aka the ward, in this case Darius, by making sure that the guardian Orion will always place themselves between him and danger. So, in effect, if Darius were to come under attack, Orion would feel it and be duty-bound to come to his aid. It was said that guardians could even feel the pain of their wards if they were injured, and would give every last drop of their magic to protect and heal them. So a guardian would die for their ward? Darcy asked, her voice dropping into a whisper. Absolutely. if it was necessary to save their ward's life. Apparently, the bond does more than just make the guardian protective, though. It also draws the two of them together, their souls aching for each other's company if they spend too much time apart. It's supposed to be a very intense. It's quite outdated practice, though. Years ago, the powerful families used to force people to be their guardians against their will, so laws were put into place to stop that from happening. Now, a guardian must volunteer to take up the position and complete various assessments and trials before they can be bonded to their ward. Orion must care very deeply for Darius to have agreed to such a role. It's not something that can be undone once the magic is cast. Being a guardian is for life. Only death can release either of them from that bond. So Darius is bound by this just as much as Orion is? Darcy asked in an undertone. Geraldine nodded seriously. Oh, holy moly, Pop-Tart, speak of the devil, she muttered, looking over my shoulder. I turned to see Darius striding into the room with Seth, Max, and Caleb at his side. They were still in their dirty pitbull uniforms, which seemed to be drawing even more attention to them than usual, and I couldn't deny how good they looked in them. Caleb's shirt had even been torn on one shoulder, and my gaze lingered on the toned muscles of his chest, which were exposed. Several girls called out to try and snag their focus, a few more of them waving and whistling. The airs absorbed the attention, like they were owed it, and I tried not to stare along with everyone else. I swallowed thickly, hoping not to draw their attention. Max's eyes shifted over to us, and I stilled as he pointed our way. Oh, crap, Darcy breathed, as the others followed his gaze, and the four of them cut straight through the crowded room towards us. Students scrambled aside as they moved, a few even leaping out of their chairs to give them room to approach. The ass bristled around us, some of them standing, others raising their hands like they might cast magic. I should have felt reassured by their show of solidarity, but I knew it hadn't really meant anything. They had to fight for their own position. If the heirs came against us, even one-on-one, no one would intervene. Hey, little Vegas, Max said as the four of them came to stand over us. I'd hardly seen him since he'd song-spelled me, and I'd begun to hope that he was avoiding me because I knew a secret. Apparently not. What do you want? I asked coldly. Just checking in with our favorite twins, Seth cooed, reaching out to stroke my hair. I slapped his hand away from me and glared at him. Maybe I should make myself a Tory bracelet, too. Silence had fallen all around the orb as everyone waited to see what was going to happen. My gaze slid to Caleb, and he smiled lightly, which wasn't all that reassuring, as I didn't trust him one bit. Perhaps we weren't clear enough the other night at the dance, Max snarled, prowling to the front of the group. But that was a gentle warning for you to leave this place. Maybe you should take it before things escalate. Escalate? Darcy demanded. How could they possibly escalate? Oh, I'm sure the two of you have more fears that you'd like to share with the group, he purred, and I could feel the pull of his magic as he used his siren powers against us. A pool of warmth and trust grew in my gut. A soft smile pulled at my lips. Max was kind. He was a good listener. Why wouldn't I want to let him help me deal with my fears? Max grinned triumphantly and grabbed a chair, turning it so that he could sit on it backwards as he leaned close to me. Tell me about your boyfriend, the one who left you to drown in that car, he urged, reaching out to touch my cheek. Did you give him your V card, too? A flicker of fear shuddered through me as I remembered sinking to the bottom of that river. But he'd been wrong about the V card guess. I'd given my virginity to a wholly different asshole. No, I breathed. I didn't. You want to tell the group who did, then? Max asked with a grin, his power wrapping me in thick cords and refusing to let go. In place of the fear that had been pulling at me, I felt lust building in my veins, and my flesh heated at the memory of a dark room, roaming hands. Oh, hell no, you psychotic asshole. I shoved all of my will into fighting off and then pulled his to fighting off the pull of his gift, and my fist snapped out with every inch of rage I was harboring against this douchebag. My knuckles collided directly with the center of his throat. Max fell back off the chair with a cry of pain and hit the floor with the chair on top of him. The siren spell was broken, and I was on my feet half a second later, flames springing to life in my hands. I spared half a glance at the other heirs, but they only looked on in surprise. This was between me and Max, and they weren't going to get involved for once. "You crazy bitch!" Max wheezed, his voice strangled with pain. "I am a crazy bitch," I agreed, glaring down at him. "And if you try that screwed up siren shit on me ever again, you'll find out just how much of a bitch I can be." He hissed a curse and raised a palm, throwing a wave of water at me, and I unleashed the fire in my hands, hurling a torrent of power into the blow, and the two elements collided in the space between us, canceling each other out with a hiss of steam. Max scrambled backwards, preparing for a second blow, and adrenaline shot through my limbs. I was outmatched here, and he knew it. I may not have been able to fight him with magic, but I'd grown up in the shittiest part of town, and I sure as hell knew how to brawl like a cornered alley cat. Before he could cast another spell at me, I aimed a kick at his balls. Max grunted a curse as he doubled in on himself, clutching his manhood, and I leaned down to speak to him in a low tone. "I'd think long and hard about trying to pull any more secrets from my lips," I hissed, "because one of the ones I'm keeping aren't my own." His eyes widened in surprise as he looked up at me. "If you tell anyone what I said when you were song-spelled, then I interrupted him before he could threaten me with anything, my voice low and cold. "It won't matter what you do to me after. Your secret will be out there. So I think you were just about to agree to keeping your leech powers to yourself." Max scowled as he propped himself up on one arm, the pain in his balls obviously easing off. "Fine," he spat, as if he were going to get up, but I wanted to really make sure he got the point. I lifted my palms at Max, and Darcy cried out in encouragement before I sent a wave of air crashing into him. It caught him in its grip, and sent him flying into the air, tumbling away from me across the room. I didn't wait for him to recover and come see me again. I caught Darcy's arm, and we turned and headed for the exit. Diego, Sophia, Geraldine, Angelica, and the rest of Ass got to their feet and swarmed around us while we walked away. Darcy linked her arm with mine, and she grinned triumphantly as we made it outside. "That is another point to us," she said in a low voice. And man, did it feel good. Before we could get very far, Caleb shot out through the crowd and came to a halt in front of me. He dropped his pitball bag on the floor beside us and pushed a hand through his curls in a way that drew attention to his flexing bicep. And it didn't seem to be entirely accidental. "Can I have a word, sweetheart?" he asked casually, like I hadn't just gone head-to-head with one of his friends and come out on top. "Why?" I asked, my tone unfriendly. "You're breaking my heart with this Ice Queen act," he teased, stepping into my personal space. "If you're going to bite me, then just get on with it. Toying with your food is so unattractive." "No biting, just come and talk to me," he said, his eyes turning puppy dog on me. And damn, if Caleb Altair didn't look cute as hell when he was begging. I glanced at Darcy and was surprised to find her eyes sparkling with excitement. "It's fine," she said. "We could wait for you here if you want some privacy." I almost asked her why the hell she'd think I'd want privacy with one of the assholes who tormented us, but her gaze slipped from mine to Caleb's pitbull bag on the ground. And for the most fleeting of seconds, I realized this just might be the opportunity we'd be waiting for. To get some revenge on the Terra heir, and I could be the distraction. "Fine," I said, sighing in a defeated way. Caleb smiled like I'd just made his day, and caught my hand, pulling me after him as he led me around the side of the orb, leaving his bag on the ground. He drew me along until we were alone at the rear of the building. the light of the setting sun blazing orange across its golden surface. As soon as he was sure we couldn't be seen, he caught my waist and pushed me against the bronze structure. Thanks to my run, I was wearing leggings and a sports bra, so his hands were warm against the bare skin on my stomach. "What are you doing?" I asked before he could move any closer. "Hoping to convince you to kiss me again," he murmured, and my pulse hitched at the confidence in his tone. "Not likely," I said dismissively. Caleb groaned like I was torturing him, and I couldn't help but smile. "I can't believe you just sucker-punched Max," he said. "Of course I did. He was being a dick. And I'm not going to give him the details of my sex life to jerk off over." "You're a straight badass, Tori," Caleb joked, drawing a little closer to me. "Were you worried that people might have found out what I did with you in that classroom?" He reached out to touch my cheek, but I fought off the temptation to be sucked in by his rugged looks. "Well, it would be pretty embarrassing if anyone found out I had such terrible taste in men," I replied. Caleb chuckled darkly, and a shiver ran down my spine, but I refused to acknowledge it. "Are you going to tell me Max's secret, then?" he asked, changing the subject. I frowned at him. I'd thought that part of my interaction with Max had stayed private because of the noise the crowd was making. But Caleb had obviously used his vampire hearing to listen in. "Oh, you know, he gets a hard-on for Pegasus, just like you," I teased, and a thrill of satisfaction ran through me as I saw anger flashing in Caleb's navy eyes at that taunt. "That rumor is a load of shit," he snapped, and my smile widened. "Touchy," I teased. Caleb released a breath before flashing me a dazzling smile, which said he didn't give a shit, but I could see through it. "So you're not going to tell me what Max's secret was?" he pressed. "I could coerce it from you, you know." "I'm sure you could. Or you could just ask him yourself," I shrugged. I wasn't entirely sure why I was keeping Max a secret apart from the fact that I'd seen the honesty in him when he'd said that revealing it could hurt Solaria as a whole. And as much as I didn't want to take on the responsibility of ruling this kingdom, I didn't want to give the nymphs an advantage against it either. Caleb seemed to consider that, and I guessed his loyalty to his friend won out over curiosity because he dropped the subject. "So, how did you enjoy being song-spelled?" he asked mischievously. "Being forced out of my bed in the middle of the night to spend time with one of my least favorite people." "I've had better evenings," I said dryly. "Yeah, but you did get to make out with him," he said with a grin. I rolled my eyes and didn't dignify that with a response. "So are you going to tell me who's the better kisser?" he pushed, leaning in so close that his breath mingled with mine. I bit my lip as I made a show of considering it, and the hunger lighting Caleb's eyes made my pulse hitch. Neither of you really stood out, so it's hard to say. Caleb pushed his tongue into his cheek as he tried to stop me from baiting him. "Maybe you need a reminder, then." He leaned in, but I turned away so that his mouth would hit my cheek instead of my lips. "You're really going to make me work for this, aren't you?" he growled as his mouth shifted to my neck and my skin lit up beneath him. But I wasn't ready to let him off the hook for everything he and his friends had put us through. He needed to be punished, and I hoped that I'd given Darcy enough time to advance our plans against him. I cleared my throat to cover the racing of my heart and pushed him back. "I actually have things to do tonight, so if you're done with your questions and you're not going to bite me, then I'm going to leave." Caleb stared at me in surprise as I slipped out of his grip. I turned away from him and headed back around the orb to find my friends again. "You're killing me, you know that, right?" he called after me. "I'm sure you can find a nice piece of Pegasus girl to help you work through some of that frustration," I replied without bothering to look back at him. As I returned to Darcy and the others, she grinned at me conspiratorially. Caleb's bag was exactly where he'd left it, as if nothing had happened in his absence. We walked away, and I glanced back at him as he retrieved it. His gaze was fixed on me, and I smirked at him as he watched me leave. I knew I was playing with fire when it came to him, but I just couldn't help myself. Once we were far enough from him to be sure that he couldn't overhear, I turned to Darcy expectantly. So? I got his atlas. Caleb Altair just joined a lot of Pegasus appreciation groups on Facebook, she said with a grin. And he also sent a few suggestive messages to some Pegasus girls on campus. An excited laugh fell from my lips, and I high-fived my sister. Those assholes won't know what hit them when we're through. It was pretty late by the time I made it back to my room, but the satisfied smirk hadn't left my lips since I'd sucker-punched Max in the throat. I amused myself by sorting through my latest online shopping orders while listening to some seriously cheery music, which I selected from a playlist I'd found on my atlas. I was intermittently dancing and singing along. I couldn't help my smug-ass smile from finding my face as it did. I was guessing a Pegasus had put the playlist together, and it suited my mood just fine, because I was every shade of happy after beating down Max Rigel in front of all of his friends. Of course, I was sure I'd suffer the consequences of that interaction soon enough, but it was worth whatever he'd thrown at me, just to know that I'd, well and truly, humiliated him for once. The weather was having mood swings again, and it had swung back to stupidly humid tonight. I'd thrown my pillow open and dressed in a tiny pair of shorts and a thin cami, but I still felt hotter than a polar bear at the beach. I was waiting for Sophia to join me for a study session, but she was running late. I was happy enough to sort through my latest online shopping purchases, though. Darcy seemed to think I had an addiction as I rifled through a box of lacy underwear, and I was beginning to think she might have a point. But I didn't care. I'd never had disposable income before, and the stipend we'd been given was stupidly generous. I didn't mind flexing my plastic muscles to their limit as a hobby. A loud knock sounded at my door just as Taylor Swift's Shake It Off started, and I upped my dance moves as I called for Sophia to come in. "You're just in time," I said as I grabbed a red bra from the box. "Diego would go nuts over you in this." I turned to face her, and my mouth fell open as I found brooding dragon asshole in my doorway instead of my friend. Weirdly, he was smiling at me like I amused him instead of scowling like I just pissed on his grandma. But I wasn't going to trust this strangely friendly visage. I stopped dancing instantly and tossed the bra back in the box. "Don't stop dancing on my account," Darius urged, his eyes dripping over my shorts in a way that made my blood heat. "What do you want?" I demanded. "I had no idea you were such a huge Taylor Swift fan," he said, leaning against the doorframe like he owned the damn place, which I guess he thought he did, as the almighty house captain. Taylor belted out another chorus, and I tilted my head as I regarded him. She makes some very good points, which I happen to agree with. "It suits you," he said. "What does?" I asked, smiling. I scowled at him. It's hardly surprising, since you haven't seen it very often. I tapped my atlas and killed the music and then folded my arms. Back to my original question, though. What do you want? Darius released a breath, and the amusement left his eyes as he adjusted to the new tone in the room. "I have an invitation for you and your sister to come to a party at my family's house to meet the Celestial Council," he said. I raised an eyebrow at him, waiting for the punchline as he offered me a thick envelope stamped with a swirling golden script. "No thanks," I replied, not taking it, and swinging the door shut in his face. His boot landed over the threshold, and the door bounced off of it. Why did these assholes think that was okay? "It's not the kind of invitation you can refuse," he said through gritted teeth. "I beg to disagree," I said dryly. A night at his house sounded like a very specific flavor of hell, and I had no interest in tasting it. "What makes you think that you can say no?" he growled. "It's next Saturday night. I'll come get you at 6. Wear something nice." He eyed my shorts and tight shirt with disapproval, and I raised an eyebrow at him as he turned to walk away, tossing the invite at my feet. He hadn't seemed to hate my outfit so much when he'd been watching my dance moves. "Yeah, that's not going to work for me," I called, leaving the invite on the floor. "But feel free to rock up here at any time you like next weekend. I won't be here anyway." I swung the door shut and headed to my bed, flopping down and tapping my atlas back on so the cheery beat of my music resumed. I plugged my headphones in and slapped them on, selecting some old-school Eminem to suit my new mood and smirking at the change in pace. I laid back on the soft mattress for half a second before the door flew open and Darius stalked in again, all testosterone and flexing muscles. But I wasn't afraid of him for once. This was an argument he couldn't win, and I wasn't going to do his stupid party no matter what he did to me. I pretended not to notice him and cranked up the volume as he began laying into me. His voice was lost to Eminem rapping The Real Slim Shady. My heart was pounding a little harder, but I ignored it as I forcefully ignored him. After about 5 seconds of me pretending that there wasn't a 6.5-foot lump of muscle standing over me with a scowl deep enough to get lost in, a torrent of water slammed into me. I flinched back and cried out as Darius ripped my headphones off and tossed them aside. "You're walking on a damn thin ice with me, Roxy," he growled. "If you keep pushing me, you're seriously gonna regret it." "Fuck you," I spat. "You treat me like shit every day of the week, so what difference does it make if you threaten to do it more? You want me to go to your stupid party? Then you're going to have to find me and drag me there kicking and screaming, and I'll spend the entire night embarrassing the shit out of you just for the hell of it. It's not like I give a fuck what Mommy and Daddy 8-Crux think of me anyway." Darius snatched my wrist into his grasp and dragged me upright so that he could snarl in my face. "This is your last warning." "Warn away, asshole," I hissed. "You can't do any more to me than you already have. And I noticed you haven't tried to drown me again since your little pal Orion gave you a dressing down, so I'm guessing you aren't actually allowed to kill me." His grip on my arm tightened painfully, and I couldn't rein in my flinch quickly enough to stop him noticing. He released me suddenly, and I drew my arm against my chest, fighting the urge to massage the pain away. "Of course I'm not going to kill you," he muttered, and I scoffed. So he had one line that he wouldn't cross, and that was murder. Great to know. Darius let out a sigh before continuing in a softer tone. "What will it take to get you to come willingly?" I narrowed my eyes at him. "To quote you, when I came into your room needing something from you, if you want me to help you, you'll have to make me. And I'm sure you can't control my smart mouth or preference for crop tops and leather jackets. So I doubt you'll be able to force my cooperation at this level. Well, a level which you find acceptable, so I suggest you give up." Darius eyed me curiously for a moment, and the difference it made to his features was almost breathtaking. I wasn't sure he ever really looked at me with anything other than a scowl in place before. He really was devastatingly good-looking. Every inch of his face looked like it had been carved from stone, all strong lines and perfect angles. My heart thumped unevenly for a moment, and I swallowed down the traitorous glimmer of attraction I felt to him, holding myself firmly in denial over it. "Oh, about a trade, then," he suggested, lowering his voice, and leaning closer to me like we were sharing a secret. "I'll tutor you, like I said, if you and your sister come to this party willingly, make nice with my father, wear a pretty dress, and make some attempt to behave like you're civilized." I was so shocked by his suggestion that for several seconds I could only stare at him. "And I'll promise to be nice to you," he added, reading my silence as hesitation instead of surprise. "For that night only." "I doubt you know how," I replied flatly, plucking at my wet shirt, which was plastered to me. I was going to have to impose on Darcy tonight if I wanted to sleep in a dry bed. Darius pursed his lips and reached out towards me. I took a step back, expecting him to turn angry again, but instead his fingers skimmed against the soaked material which clung to my stomach, and he drew the water back out of my shirt. My heart fluttered in response to his touch, and I cursed my terrible taste in men for the millionth time. I watched him in silence as every drop of water was removed from my clothes, hair, and bed until a ball of liquid hung in the air between us. Darius directed it into my bathroom, and I watched as it dropped into the basin and disappeared down the drain. "See?" I can be nice, he said, as if he'd just done me a favor, even though we both knew that he'd been the one to drench me in the first place. He withdrew his hand from my waist, and I ignored the ache I felt as the point of contact between us was broken. You must really care about impressing Daddy Acrux, I muttered, twisting my long hair between my fingers just to give myself something to do. Darius gave a noncommittal noise, and I realized my guess was far off the mark. Or you're really that afraid of disappointing him, I added. Darius's eyes flashed with some deep emotion for half a second before he squashed it back down. You don't know anything about my family, he growled, that anger rising in him just as quickly as it had disappeared. Well, if they're anything like you, then they're obviously a bunch of assholes. A wave of heated power slammed into me, knocking me back against the wall as Darius surged forward, leaning down to glare right into my eyes. Say that again, he challenged, and the threat in his voice was clear. My heart pounded with fear, but I knew I'd been right before. He couldn't kill me, and I was sick of feeling like I just had to roll over and take his bullshit. If he was determined to torment me, then fine. There was nothing I could do about it, but I wasn't going to let him break me. Well, at least now I know where you get it from, I breathed. His eyes flashed with the reptilian slits of his dragon form, the irises turning golden for a moment as he glared at me. Fuck you. He was gone as quickly as he had arrived, his powers releasing me so that I was left slumped against the wall while he stalked from my room. For a few seconds I couldn't move. My heart raced, and fear trickled through me through my veins, but I forced myself to follow him to the doorway. He had almost made it to the end of the corridor when I called out to stop him. I'll meet you in the fire arena after dinner tomorrow. If you can stick to your word and help me harness my magic, then I'll come to your stupid party and I'll even wear a pretty dress like I'm a nice girl. Darius stopped and looked over his shoulder at me in surprise. Just like that? I shrugged. Maybe I want to see how the other half live, I teased. And for a second, he actually seemed amused. But I must have been imagining it. I'll have the dresses sent over for you. Darius walked away before I could tell him that I was perfectly capable of dressing myself, and I rolled my eyes before I shut the door. Looks like we will be having dinner with the devil the next Saturday night, then.